While I was tidying up my 13-year-old daughter Sarah's room, something happened that turned my world upside down. I was just picking up clothes and toys when I noticed something unusual hidden behind a pile of blankets in the corner. My heart suddenly raced, and I felt a sharp chill run through my body. There, lying so still and quietly, was a tiny baby. I froze for a moment, not sure if I was seeing things. How could this be? I blinked and looked again. Yes, there it was, a small baby wrapped in a blanket, lying peacefully on the floor. My heart pounded wildly in my chest, and I felt a wave of panic wash over me. My mind was spinning with questions, but the most important one was, how did this happen? How did a baby end up in my daughter's room without me knowing? I turned to Sarah, who was sitting on her bed, and I asked her what was going on. Sarah, what is this? Where did this baby come from? My voice was shaking, and I was desperate for answers. But when she looked up at me, her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. She opened her mouth, trying to speak, but no words came out. Her eyes were filled with tears, and I could see she was struggling to say anything. Her whole body seemed tense, like she was holding something back. I could feel the panic rising inside of me. My mind was racing, but I had to stay calm. Sarah, please, I need you to tell me what's going on. How did this baby get here? But Sarah just shook her head, tears streaming down her face, unable to explain what had happened. I wanted to reach out to comfort her, to hold her, and tell her everything would be okay. But my mind was clouded with fear and confusion. I needed to understand how this was possible. I wrapped the baby carefully in a soft blanket, hoping to make him feel warm and safe. But my focus was still on Sarah, trying to make sense of everything. She sat there, hugging her pillow tightly, her eyes avoiding mine, still unable to speak. After a few moments, I took a deep breath and said, Sarah, listen to me. I know you're scared, but I need you to tell me the truth. Where did this baby come from? I could feel the urgency in my voice, but she still didn't respond. The silence in the room was suffocating, and I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. I realized that this wasn't just a situation I could handle on my own. I had to make sure the baby was okay. So I quickly called Dr. Morgan, our family doctor. I could barely keep my voice steady as I said, Dr. Morgan, it's an emergency. Please come quickly. It felt like forever before Dr. Morgan arrived, but when he did, his calm demeanor helped me breathe a little easier. He immediately went to the baby, checking him over carefully. The baby seems stable for now, Dr. Morgan said, his voice both reassuring and serious. But he's very undernourished and will need proper care and feeding. I felt a wave of relief. At least the baby was okay for the moment. But I couldn't shake the question that hung in the air. How long had he been in Sarah's room? When I asked, Sarah just shook her head again, still not offering any answers. I looked at Dr. Morgan, unsure of what to do next. He nodded, taking notes, and suggested that we contact Child Protective Services, CPS, to make sure the baby received the care he needed. The moment he said that, a fresh wave of panic hit me. CPS? Could this really be happening? The thought of CPS coming into our lives made my stomach turn. I didn't know what that would mean for Sarah, or how it would change everything. But Dr. Morgan was firm. It's necessary to make sure the child's safety is guaranteed. We have to be sure he's taken care of properly. Sarah, who had been silent this whole time, suddenly tensed up even more at the mention of CPS. Her breathing became faster, and she hugged her pillow even tighter, as if it was the only thing holding her together. I turned back to her, desperate for an explanation. Sarah, please, we need your help. You have to tell me what happened. Where did this baby come from? I asked again, my voice strained and pleading, but she didn't answer. Her eyes were filled with fear, and she wouldn't look at me. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on both of us. The silence between us felt heavy, like the walls were closing in. I didn't want to push her too hard, but I had to know the truth. As I tried to make sense of everything, I started to think back over the last few weeks. Had I missed anything? Were there signs that I hadn't seen? Moments when Sarah had seemed off, or when I had noticed her acting differently. I remembered a few times when she had been alone in her room for hours, more than usual. I also recalled a few days when she seemed more withdrawn than usual, but I hadn't thought much of it at the time. Maybe I had been too busy to notice. Maybe I had missed something important. I began to wonder if Sarah had been seeing someone I didn't know about. Had there been any visitors I hadn't noticed? Could someone have been sneaking in and out of the house without me knowing? I needed answers, and fast. I tried searching through Sarah's phone and computer for any clues. Maybe there would be a message or something that would explain what had happened. But everything seemed normal. The messages were routine, and the emails were nothing out of the ordinary. My frustration grew as I kept coming up with nothing. I turned back to Sarah. "Is there anyone you've been spending time with recently that I don't know about?" I asked. She hesitated, her eyes darting away from mine. "I don't want to get anyone in trouble," she whispered, barely audible. Her words only made me more worried. It felt like she was hiding something, but I couldn't figure out what. Then, I remembered a conversation I had had with Mr. Jenkins, one of our neighbors. He had mentioned seeing a strange car parked outside our house late at night. He didn't know who it belonged to, but it made me uneasy. I decided to talk to more of our neighbors to see if they had seen anything unusual. I spoke to Mrs. Sullivan, who was always watchful of what happened around the neighborhood. I asked if she had noticed anyone unfamiliar near our house. She said she hadn't seen anything, but promised to keep an eye out for anything unusual. Then, I spoke to Mrs. Allen, who lived a few houses down. She didn't know anything either, but she agreed to watch closely. Finally, Mrs. Alvarez, another neighbor known for her sharp memory, told me something that sent a chill down my spine. She said she had seen a young girl near our house a few nights ago. The girl was holding something wrapped in a blanket and looking around nervously, as if she didn't want to be seen. Mrs. Alvarez said the girl had looked scared, glancing over her shoulder as she walked by. This new information made everything even more confusing. Could the girl Mrs. Alvarez saw be connected to the baby? Was she the one who had left him in Sarah's room? I didn't know, but I had to find out. It felt like we were getting closer to understanding what had really happened, but there were still so many questions left unanswered. Sarah was still silent, her fear hanging in the air like a dark cloud. I knew she was scared, but I didn't know how to get her to open up. The more I tried to understand, the more it seemed like the answers were just out of reach. But I couldn't give up. I had to find out the truth for the sake of the baby and for Sarah's sake. It felt like we were trapped in a never-ending cycle of questions, fear, and silence. And as each day passed, the weight of the situation grew heavier, and I couldn't help but feel more and more desperate to find out what had really happened. It seemed like Sarah was trying to protect someone, but I didn't know who or why. Every time I asked her about it, she would just look at me with scared, teary eyes and stay quiet. "Sarah, we need to know everything if we're going to help you and the baby," I said, trying to sound calm but feeling very worried. She didn't say anything. It was like she was trapped in a big fear, and I didn't know what it was. I felt like Sarah was hiding something very serious, maybe even something really dangerous. I kept wondering if it had something to do with a bad situation like human trafficking, or maybe someone was hurting her. I couldn't imagine that a young girl like Sarah could be in something so awful, but I had to find out the truth to help her. I decided to start by looking into Sarah's school life and friends. I called the school counselor and asked about Sarah's activities, hoping to find a clue. It turned out that Sarah had become close to a girl named Nina. Nina had a tough life at home, and it seemed like Sarah was trying to help her. Maybe Sarah was trying to protect Nina, but I wasn't sure why. The more I learned, the more worried I became. Teachers said Nina had been missing from school for a few days. Where was she? Why didn't anyone know where she was? It felt like time was running out, and I had to find Nina to understand what was going on. I found out that Nina and Sarah were really close. They spent a lot of time together at school, and Sarah had become very protective of her. I started to think that maybe Nina was the one Sarah was hiding something for. But why? Was Nina in trouble? Or was Sarah in trouble for helping her? And who was the baby? Was it Nina's or someone else's? I tried to talk to Sarah more, but she just cried and didn't say much. "Sarah, if you're trying to help Nina, we need to know so we can help you both," I said softly, hoping she would open up. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, and I felt like I was getting closer to understanding. I knew I needed to find Nina to help everyone, so I decided to go to Nina's house. It was in a part of town that looked very run down, with broken sidewalks and empty houses. I felt nervous, but I had to keep going. When I knocked on Nina's door, her mom answered. She looked tired and wasn't very friendly. "I haven't seen her for a few days," she said, like she didn't really care. I asked her for more information, but she didn't have much to say. She comes and goes, she shrugged. That didn't help much, and I felt frustrated. How could her mom not care that her daughter was missing? A neighbor told me that they had seen Nina with an older man the night before. This made me even more worried. Who was this man, and why was Nina with him? I knew I had to find him to understand what was going on. I followed this clue to a nearby shelter where Nina had stayed before. The lady at the front desk told me that Nina had left with the man. She looked scared, she said. This made me even more anxious. What was happening to Nina, and why was she so afraid? I thanked the receptionist and went back home to talk to Sarah. When I walked in, Sarah was sitting on her bed, looking at an old photo album. Her eyes were red from crying. Sarah, we need to talk, I said, sitting next to her. She nodded but didn't look at me. I could tell she was holding in a lot of pain. I talked to some people today. I started gently. Everyone is worried about Nina. She might be in danger. Sarah wiped away a tear. I just want to help her, she whispered, but her voice was full of sadness. I know, sweetheart, I said softly, but we can't help if we don't understand. We need to know the whole story. Sarah just kept crying, and I could tell there was a secret she didn't want to share. I stayed with her, hoping she would open up and let me help. I put my hand on Sarah's shoulder, hoping to show her I was there for her. We're here for you, no matter what, I promised. She looked at me, her eyes filled with worry. Mom, I've been trying to reach the police to see if they have any reports about a missing baby, Sarah said. Officer Sanchez said he'd keep an eye out, but it might take time. I felt more nervous as time passed. Every moment without news was so hard, and Sarah was getting quieter every day, like something was weighing her down. She stayed in her room a lot, lost in thought. I wanted to help her, but she wouldn't talk. Sarah, please, we need to understand this so we can help you, I said, hoping she'd open up. But the silence between us grew, and I didn't know what to do. I knew I had to protect her, but I also needed answers. Each day without them was so hard to bear. Finally, I decided to ask a family friend, Detective Olivia, for help. She was kind and smart, and I knew she would take care of things. I called her and said, Olivia, we really need your help. Something's wrong. She said she'd come over and promised to be careful. When Olivia arrived, I felt a little better. She had a calm way about her, and I could tell she was going to help us figure this out. As I told her everything, she took careful notes, listening closely. We'll get to the bottom of this, she promised. Olivia went to ask the neighbors more questions and looked into Nina's past. She told me, we need to know every little detail. Anything could be important. I stayed at home, waiting for any news while Sarah stayed quiet, too scared to talk. Olivia went from house to house, asking people about strange things they'd seen. Her careful work made me feel a little better. Later, Olivia found out something worrying. Nina's family had been through a very bad custody fight, and there were signs of the baby being taken. Olivia said, this is worse than we thought. Nina could be in danger. The more we learned, the more worried I became. This wasn't just about a missing person. It was about something much scarier. The baby could be in danger. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. Olivia kept working, and I could only wait. Sarah was still quiet, looking more and more scared each day. She barely ate or spoke. We need answers, Sarah, I said, trying to get her to talk, but she only nodded with wide, fearful eyes. The silence between us was hard to take. Olivia found out something else. The older man seen with Nina was her father, and he had a history of being violent. This changes everything, Olivia said. We now knew Nina's father was dangerous, and we had to find them both before he did anything worse. Nina had been trying to run away from him, and she trusted Sarah to keep her and the baby safe. I finally understood why Sarah had been so quiet and scared. She didn't want to get anyone hurt. I felt grateful to Olivia for her help. Thank you for trusting me, I said. We needed to find Nina and the baby fast before something bad happened. Sarah's silence made sense now, but the mystery was still far from over. Who was the baby, and why was it all such a big secret? I couldn't stop thinking about it. Whatever was happening, it was so serious that it scared Sarah enough to keep everything hidden. As the days went by, Sarah got worse. She didn't want to talk to anyone and stayed in her room for hours, her head down. It was heartbreaking to see her like this. I would tell her, we're here for you, but she still wouldn't open up. Finally, After a lot of silence, Sarah agreed to tell me what was going on, but only if I promised not to call anyone yet. "Mom, I'll tell you everything, but you can't tell anyone," she whispered, her face covered in tears. "I promise," I said softly. I needed to know what was happening, but I didn't want to scare her more. I gently urged her to tell me everything, hoping I could help. After a long silence, Sarah finally broke down and cried. "Nina came one night so scared, holding a baby," she said, her voice shaking. "She didn't know where else to go." I listened, my heart breaking for both of them. "What happened next?" I asked softly. Sarah's eyes were full of fear, and she looked at me as she spoke. "She asked me to hide the baby," Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. "She was scared of her father. He was dangerous, and they needed to run away." I understood then why Sarah had kept everything so quiet. "Was anyone with her?" I asked, trying to get the full story. "No, just her and the baby," Sarah answered. "She was alone." The truth hit me hard. Sarah had hidden Nina and the baby in her room because she thought it was the only way to keep them safe. "You did what you thought was right," I said, trying to comfort her. "But now we need to find a safer way to protect everyone," I added. Nina had promised to come back, but she hadn't. Now Sarah was carrying a secret too heavy for her to bear. "I didn't know who to trust," Sarah whispered, her voice cracking. "I understand why you did it," I said gently. "You wanted to protect Nina and her baby." Sarah nodded, tears running down her face. "But now we need to find a way to protect everyone," I said, feeling the weight of the situation. It was harder now that we knew everything. The danger was real, and we couldn't just ignore it. Sarah clung to me, begging, "Please, promise nothing will happen to Nina." "I won't let anything happen to her," I said, holding her tight. I said, "We'll find a way," even though I didn't know how yet. Detective Olivia joined our team to help, using her smart ideas to keep Nina's father away while we looked for her. She stayed calm and helped us think clearly, even though we were all scared and unsure. We had to be careful because if we made one mistake, everything could go wrong. The pressure was so heavy, but we kept focusing on finding Nina and keeping everyone safe. Sarah had been brave enough to tell me the truth, and that helped me feel stronger. She showed me how important it was to protect Nina and her baby. This wasn't just something to do. It was a mission, and we couldn't fail. Finally, we found Nina at a friend's house. She was tired but relieved that her baby was okay. When we got there, Nina was holding on to her friend, looking around nervously until she saw us. Detective Olivia and I told her that she was safe now, and she wasn't alone. When she realized everything would be okay, tears of relief filled her eyes, a mix of fear and hope. This was the beginning of Nina's healing journey. The police took care of her father's bad behavior and made sure Nina, her baby, and our family were safe. Detective Olivia worked with the police, and soon Nina's father was taken away. Watching him leave made me feel relieved, but I knew there was still a long way to go. Social services made sure Nina's baby was safe and found a place for her to stay, so Nina could start getting her life back together without worrying. It was a small piece of peace, but it was something. With a plan in place, Nina and her baby could begin to heal and work toward a safer future. This was just the first step, but it filled us with hope. Sarah's actions came from love and friendship. She risked a lot to save her friend, and once I understood why she did it, I felt better. This made me even more determined to help Nina and her baby. Our focus shifted to helping them find safety and peace. With Nina and her baby out of danger, Sarah started to feel better. The worry that had been weighing her down began to lift, and I could see glimpses of the happy, carefree girl she used to be. When Sarah smiled, it warmed my heart. We told her that she had done the right thing by helping her friend, and now it was time for all of us to heal and move forward. I thank Detective Olivia for everything she had done. Without her, we wouldn't have been able to solve this tough situation. Olivia smiled and said, "It's my job. I'm happy I could help." Her dedication made sure Nina, her baby, and our family could finally have peace and safety. We started planning how to support Nina and her baby as they took their first steps toward a new, better life. Social services helped by offering counseling and a safe place to stay. They gave Nina the support she needed for a fresh start. Our family promised to be there for them, offering love and understanding every step of the way. We knew it was more than just about safety. It was about helping them have a happy future. Nina and her baby were just starting to heal. Our family was stronger now. We had faced a scary problem together, and it brought us closer. We realized that love, honesty, and support can help us get through even the hardest times. Sarah didn't feel alone anymore, and I was so proud of her. We learned that when bad things happen, sticking together makes us stronger and can help us move forward. We were ready for whatever might come next, standing side by side. Thank you for sticking with me through this story. This story may be made up, but it shows how real problems can be. Many children face very hard times without the help they need. In real life, things can turn out much worse than in any story. As parents and caregivers, we need to be there for our kids. It's not just about rules. It's about listening, being aware, and making them feel safe enough to talk. Sarah's story reminds us that sometimes we don't notice when a child is struggling. We need to keep talking and paying attention, not because we're suspicious, but because we love and want to protect them. One last thing, danger doesn't always look obvious. It could be hidden in friendships or things we don't see. That's why it's so important to build trust with our kids. Trust is what makes a difference when they need us most. If you enjoyed this story and would like to see more content like it, I encourage you to subscribe to my channel. By subscribing, you'll stay updated on all our latest, inspiring and heartwarming stories and have the opportunity to engage with our growing community. Additionally, I would love to hear your thoughts and feedback in the comment section below. Thank you for your support, and I look forward to sharing more captivating narratives with you.